This next session, my engineering brain just has trouble with this. It's called Shapeshifters Anonymous, transforming advocacy to reality in the walking world. And I'm not entirely sure what's going to go on here, but our four speakers are Sandy James, who I think everybody knows by now who she is, Jacky Kennedy, who is the director of Canada Walks Green Communities. Jacky, 2.5 years ago, I told her that I hated walking, and she got me here. So we've come a long way. Daryl Rock, who is the chair of the Rick Hansen Institute. Daryl actually has gone out with my staff and me to look at accessibility in the city of Vancouver. He's actually had some great suggestions, and since we've reconnected, we're going to follow up on that. And Gwen Boyle, who's a public art artist. This should be very interesting. So Sandy's going to take this away. So thank you.
Thank you, Neil. I think one of the things about Walk 21, and we're talking about transforming the car city, is how does advocacy fit into that? How do we make a city that's walkable? How do we retrofit cities like Gordon Price was talking about this morning that are really designed around cars and the requirements of the International Transportation Engineers? Or Institute of Transportation Engineers, how do we do it? And this is such an important moment in my life to have three people who I've had the honor to know that really I think have done a substantial amount for advocacy and for walkability in Canada. And Jacky Kennedy, I've had the honor to do some work and some speaking engagements with her. She's involved with Green Communities Canada, involved with Ontario Walks, involved with Canada Walks, Walks Everywhere. We were actually working together in the New York City Department of Transportation, and Jacky's the only person I know that thinks walking across New York, which we now know takes 1 hour and 3/4, is what one should do every day, going to work. Daryl Rock is extraordinary. He's a scuba diver, like I am. He's actually published a book talking about Canadian heroes. He's active with neurotrauma. He's involved with an Ontario Institute. He works federally on national issues, and he's also chair of the Rick Hansen Foundation, and they have an extraordinary project just starting that he's going to be chatting about. And right next to me on the right is a person that the steering committee for this conference unanimously chose as the public art artist that we would like to be present. Gwen Boyle is an extraordinary individual. She's actually a graduate of the, it's now called Emily Carr College of Art and Design. I think more than any other artist I know, she does work that takes the cosmos and takes the elements of what we walk on and tries to have those synaptic moments where it inspires our walking. So I just want to thank you all for coming. And what I would like to do now is just ask each of the presenters just to do a little 4 to 5 minute chat. And after that, we're just going to do a bit of talk to do some of the connections about how we can transform an auto city to make it more walkable. And Jacky, do you want to start?
Sure. Okay, good. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Sandy. I was really honored when the Walk 21 committee asked me to present today, and find this actually a little scary, because I don't really think what I do is that special, actually. I've been doing this since 1994, where I gave up my corporate job to try to get involved in finding local solutions to global environmental issues, mostly spurred on by my children. And back in 1990, I remember I was sitting outside of my son's school. He was about 5 at the time. I worked in the burbs, and I had to drive back into the city and pick him up. I was in my car. And I just had this epiphany that what were we all doing sitting outside here in our cars? Because we all lived within a few blocks. This was a City of Toronto school where the longest distance was 12 blocks. So a few years later, I was in a position where I left my corporate job, and I was able to make some changes. And I thought, I want to take a look at that school program. And 15 years later, I'm still here, which is pretty incredible. Can we have the next slide?
Oh, we have little, I forgot a technology.
Oh, okay. So I'll just keep talking.
We just do this and it would
Where do I push?
She pushes in the middle, 11?
That's good, philosophy. Okay.
Well, let's try the middle one. That one will probably turn it off.
So forward and backward.
Okay, great, thanks. Now we got the technical stuff sorted. So I chose Green Communities Canada because the philosophy that they have really fits in very well with mine. It's about searching out the local champions, the people who are really passionate about this work, and working with them and working with members of the community to help them or to facilitate what it is that's wrong with their community. It's not like when you come in as an expert or a consultant and you say, well, this is what's wrong and this is how you're going to fix it. It's actually about sitting down and having them understand what they can do differently, what they're doing well, and then working with them to help them make that change. Because I've always believed, even in my work in the corporate sector, that it's about networking, it's about partnerships, but you're much stronger if you all do this together. So I can go there. Cool. By now, you're all familiar with the International Charter for Walking, and we've seen lots of folks up here signing it, which is great. Since 2006, we've actually fashioned most of our strategies for walking around the International Charter and its very thoughtful 8 principles. And to date, we actually are aware of about 35 municipalities across Canada that have signed the Charter since 2007. So that's pretty cool. But Harry is out there somewhere, and he's probably going, oh my God, that's me. To better understand our philosophy and our really grassroots process, I'm just going to quickly highlight on one of the communities that we've worked with since 2000. At that time, my focus was on safe routes to school. And a colleague of mine, Harry Sorchak, that's him up there with Mayor Friel from the city of Brantford, he's a retired high school phys ed teacher. And I got to know Harry through our work with Safe Routes to School. And he phoned me up, having just moved to Brantford, and said, they have no Safe Routes to School program here in Brantford. We've got to change this. So we worked to put in a local committee, and together we created a really vibrant Safe Routes to School program in Brantford. However, we didn't want to stop there. So in 2007, when Green Communities Canada and the City of Toronto co-hosted the Walk 21 conference, which was the first time the conference had been in Canada, we did this Walkability Roadshow. We came up with the idea to turn the International Charter for Walking into a benchmarking questionnaire and to benchmark communities against those 8 principles. So Brantford was one of the communities that we worked with at that time. And Harry and his local team of municipal staff, we had public health professionals and citizens, were able to influence Brantford's downtown revitalization plans to make walking the top priority there. Through the roadshow, we were able to be very successful in getting significant changes made to that plan. And you can see some of what they've accomplished in these slides. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about that because Harry's actually presenting in a breakout session during the conference. And so you can go to that and learn about what he's done. So once Green Communities has worked with communities to help them develop the action plans and get started on implementation, we try to stay in touch and we offer assistance as much as possible. One of the things that we have done, and we have 3 communities represented here today, is a Walkability Award. We started this in Ontario, and the 3 winners from this award actually have representatives here at the conference. And now we're going to actually take a look at a walking designation program similar to the one that they have in the United States. And so my colleague, Kate and Mandy, are working on that right now. It wouldn't be possible to keep this Walkolution going without the Canada Walks team. And so I do want to recognize Mandy and Kate, as well as Stephanie Hahn, who has helped us with our National School Travel Plan initiative. There's a lot of work to do, but with folks like Harry and other local champions, I think that we can achieve it. So thank you.
Daryl? And now I'm going to turn over to Daryl.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Jacky. I'm also not Mike. Am I Mike? Can people hear me? There we go. I think the mic's on now. People hear me now? Yeah. Thank you. I'm also a little nervous to be up here. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but Sandy was a convincing inviter, I guess. I have had, over the last 25 years, the great fortune of marrying my career with my my passion for community change and social change. And so my bent on advocacy is slightly different than some of the advocates that I've actually worked with over the last many, many years. And I'm a strong believer in evidence-based decision-making. And over the last 20 years, having worked in the federal government, I've witnessed, not surprisingly, at least now it's not surprising, a whole lot of decision-based evidence-making. People going out and taking a decision and then looking afterwards frantically for the evidence to support the decision they wanted to take in the first place. And we laugh at that, but I'd have to ask you, do you not think that that's probably at least 50% of the decisions that get made in your environment as well, if not a whole lot more? And so what we really need to do is spend a little bit more time bridging the gap between the evidence production and the decision-making processes. And one of the poster presenters, I heard him talk, I couldn't agree with him more. How do we translate evidence into practice? Because it's not simply passing a report from one person to another, as we all know. Anyway, what I'd like to talk to you a little bit about today is the Rick Hansen Institute. Next slide. My apologies, the Rick Hansen Foundation. A little bit, many of you are from overseas, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Rick and what he did. Then I'm going to talk about some of the evidence behind this new project that we've just launched, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the project. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the initiative, simply because we're doing a walkabout. You don't call it a walkabout. What do you call it? We're doing a workshop tomorrow afternoon, and I'd encourage as many of you as can to come out and do it, and you'll see a little bit of the tool in a minute. But first of all, Rick, 25 years ago, for those of you who don't know, Rick Hansen decided that he would like to raise the profile of the issues related to disability, and so he decided to set out and wheel around the world. He's a local Vancouver boy, and in his mid-20s, he decided that he'd like to raise awareness and raise some money for the issues of disability. And so he set out, and 2 years, 2 months, 2 days later, he arrived back home. And his adventure was truly amazing when you think of somebody in a chair wheeling around the world and actually going through 43,000 kilometers of often not accessible trail. And the picture I've got up behind me here is actually you can't really tell. I apologize, there's a technical glitch there. On the left-hand side, it's Rick wheeling up the Great Wall of China 25 years ago. And then on the right-hand side, as a result of that and the lobby in China, they actually made the Great Wall of China accessible. And I think, that really says a lot about what we're trying to do. Next slide. One of the things I did say just a minute ago is that we'd like to make our decisions or base our decisions on evidence. So what's the evidence around an accessible environment for people with disabilities? The World Health Organization has estimated 650 million people around the world have some form of disability. In North America, the numbers, and you probably all know these, but the numbers represent roughly 58 million people have some sort of disability. When you look at the actual economic power of disability, roughly $178 billion a year of spending power. This is disposable income of people with disabilities in the United States alone. That's well greater than the entire economic power of the teenage generation, and yet how much energy and focus do we put on cultivating a relationship with teenagers, right? And in Canada, that's roughly $25 billion of disposable income. So the disability community does represent a significant portion and a significant market to go after. Next slide. The other thing to recognize, and you saw the slides earlier, you saw Penny showing slides about seniors and an aging population. It's no surprise to anybody that as you get older, health issues start to crop up and disabilities become more and more prevalent. What's also true in North America and around the world, however, is that seniors have higher expectations now than they did 30, 40, 50 years ago. They expect to still live in the community, and they expect to be able to participate in their community. And as that population becomes more and more of a proportion of our population in general, their needs and their expectations are going to have to be met, and they'll expect them to be met. One stat I don't have up there, and I'll share with you right now, because we're building this app, we looked at tourism. And people with disabilities, not surprisingly, like to travel. And people with disabilities take on average 2.3 trips a year, each trip lasting roughly 8 days. They usually travel with other people, and so when you look at the demographic that represents, you're actually looking at over 75 million people in North America alone travel. And one of the interesting facts that's important to recognize, next slide. People with disabilities don't generally pick, well, I use a chair, but I walk. So when I use just bear with my language. I'm probably the only non-walker that's going to talk about walking that you're going to meet today. But we tend to, most cities around the world, with the exception of Vancouver and a few other ones, have very limited accessible public transportation. Not none, but very limited. And so when somebody with a disability arrives in a community, they tend to be walkers. They walk. I went to Manhattan. It was interesting to hear your comment about Manhattan. I've walked from end to end to Manhattan, and I've walked throughout the entire Central Park, and every time I go to New York, I'm a walker. Now, I very rarely take cabs. When I went to London, I've been to about 40 different cities around the world in the last year and a half, and when we go, we walk. Rick and I were in Shanghai celebrating his 25th anniversary in China about 4 months ago, and I was saying to Neil earlier, I was walking around the city. My wife was with me, and we walked for about 4 or 5 miles around the city, and everything was beautifully accessible. New city, and everything was wonderfully accessible. Wide sidewalks, curb cuts, tactile markings on the ground, and yet we were the only walkers. You know, in a city of 28 million people, we probably ran into about 25 people in the entire 2-3 hours we were walking. Everybody used cars. There's your motor city, that bar none, right? But we enjoyed the fact that they had made it accessible. So the reality is, for people with disabilities, the issue of walking, and you heard Penny mention earlier about health, one of the major ways of staying healthy for somebody who uses a chair, but also other disabilities, is walking. So the implication of an accessible environment for walkers with disabilities is even more critical from a financial perspective, from a social responsibility perspective, and from a whole lot of other perspectives. So what are we doing about it? Next slide. Evidence-based decision-making, coming back to that. One of the things that does not exist in any centralized place is access to information about what is and what is not wheelchair accessible or accessible to people with disabilities. So we created an app. It's available for your computer, it's available for your tablet, it's available for your mobile device, iPhone, anything you have. And we created, it's called the Global Accessibility Map, and it allows people, we've created an objective framework for assessing venues, and that can be walking paths. I was in Chile about 6 months ago, and there's a wonderful walking path between a town called Valparaiso and a town called Viña del Mar. It's about a 4-mile walk, fully wheelchair accessible, designated wheelchair spots. It was just an amazing experience. So I jotted that down on my global accessibility map. The intent of this is to provide decision makers, people with disabilities primarily, but also their family, their friends, and also planners, people who actually are involved in the building of buildings or the building of infrastructure, with a tool that they can use to make informed decisions about how to make things accessible. For people with disabilities, it's more advocacy oriented. It's to give them a tool to allow them to decide where they can spend their money and where they will spend their money. And trust me, over the next 3 or 4 years, as more and more sites become targeted as 3, 4, and 5-star accessible, people will start to gravitate to those places. If the average disabled person takes 2.3 trips a year for 8 days, and they know that the places that are accessible happen to be Epcot Center and Disneyland, cruise ships and others, you'll see them go more and more to them and less to your towns and communities across the country. If you have facilities and features in your towns and communities that are accessible to people who are blind, deaf, or wheelchair users, then tag them, put them on our accessibility map, and actually spend a little bit of time profiling the good things that you've already done. Because there's nothing worse than having done something great and getting no recognition for it and no uptake. One of the poster persons presented earlier about these benches that are put in places that nobody sits on. What the heck? Why put a bench that nobody sits on, right? A little bit of plants around it, and now people will sit there. Well, similar with accessibility. There's nothing worse than spending tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars making your environment accessible if nobody knows about it. So here's an opportunity to know about it. Last slide. What I recommend from an advocate, because I do have to come back to the topic of advocacy, one of the greatest challenges I find, in Vancouver is as true to this experience as other cities, people in the planning and building environment think they know what accessibility is, and so they'll often build to what they think their standards of accessibility are. The standards in Canada are old, they're outdated, and they may not be relevant. Certainly if you look at the migration to scooters. As seniors are using scooters, a lot of the built environment that we've had for wheelchair access does not meet the needs for people who use scooters, and yet you're going to have more and more people use it. So I encourage you, rather than think you know what you mean by accessibility, to actually engage with the decision of the people who do know, whether it's our tool that used the Canadian Standards Association and a few other national and international standards to create the framework, or whether it's local or provincial or national organizations in your own countries and states and provinces that actually have the standards. Go to the newest standards. Don't rely on old, outdated standards to make your decision, and engage the community. So I really encourage you to recognize that you're doing great stuff. You should profile that, but we can all do better, and I encourage you to do that. And so my last slide, back to my first slide. If it can happen in China, and I'm not disparaging China because I was blown away with the quality of access in Shanghai and elsewhere. If they can make the Great Wall of China wheelchair accessible, do you think you can make your own communities? Thank you.
That was wonderful. I have it here. Levin, could you keep me mic'd up along with Gwen? I took a real risk this morning in asking this group to speak, and the reason I did that, and I want to stay on time, so we may not have time for questions, but the reason I did this is I want you tonight, and I've already told them that we're doing this, to talk to these people, because these people will really help and enrich your work, and I've found they've really enriched the work that I've done. So that was the reason I wanted to do this first thing in the morning. But what I want to do now is introduce, I have it, Gwen.
Oh,
It's the same.
sound.
Oh, the sound. Could we have the sound turned on, Levin? Just very low in the background. So now I'm going to have a dialogue with Gwen. Oh, there's the middle button.
Whoops. I just clicked it off.
Levin, do you have the slides that go up? Thank you. So, do you want to tell us a bit
Yes.
about this piece,
Yeah,
Gwen?
thank you. I am a public art person, and I've been very interested in working with time, universal time and human time, and working with different materials. And I started working with magnetics in my sculpture after graduating in bronze casting some 30 years ago. Anyways, the result of that was it brought me up north, up to the Arctic, where I was an artist in residence with the Polar Continental Shelf camp. Anyways, I installed a piece of sculpture, which you see, and as I put it up in the air and suspended it, the sound emanated from this piece of steel. It was unreal. It was sort of, I felt it in the air, the energy in the air was just so clear. Anyways, the sound was resonating the whole time. It made different sounds, emotion varied, but the sound was loud enough, it carried right through the tundra. You could hear it from great distance. And that's my public art piece up in the Yukon, the Arctic. It was just 7 degrees from the geomagnetic pole. And I've been working in that area for afterwards. But I also, in town, I moved into public art spaces. And this is, can I click this?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. How do you do it? This one?
I think it may be this one.
Oh.
Should I do it
Got
for
it.
you? Here, I'll grab it for you.
Sorry.
It's okay.
This is a public art piece I did in the downtown. It's treating the space in the West End section that Gordon Price was talking about.
I think it's around the 1200 block of Alberni.
Alberni, yes. And what you see here is a water feature, which I call this New Currents, an Ancient Stream, is the name of the piece, and it's at the Palisades area, I think. And what I have here is I'm talking about, what do I have down there? The boulder on top is the erratic basalt. And what I've done is taken that boulder, which is
Which is a true boulder.
Yeah, and then cast a bronze image of the actual boulder. And the idea being that one is natural, the other is man-made, and this will transform in time because it's bronze. It's a bronze casting, and
And in a way, it talks about walking in an environment, doing a natural thing, but also walking in an environment that's not too natural.
it's actually a great sitting place for downtown. I've had lots of people tell me that the working people like coming down and sitting by because the waterfall is loud enough. It covers the traffic noise, so it's quite a pleasant place to sit in. Thank you.
Next. Oops, sorry. I need to take lessons.
This is Abacus, the jade piece I did down on Kiefer near the Chinese Culture Garden. It is a working abacus. It's made of jade, and it's the jade is about 9 or 10 pounds per piece, and it's been designed so that you can lift it and move it as a natural abacus, and the jade will stay afloat. It's been a very popular piece because it seems to attract, the jade is lovely to touch to begin with, and it appeals to people and kids. And as you can see there, it's right next to a seniors complex, and they seem to like coming around it. And the thing is, it involves the community, it involves the conversation that's necessary between the Chinese older folks and the younger people. And they're delighted to show you how to work the abacus when you're down there. They'll just come and interfere and show you. So.
Yes, and that will be on the Carroll Street tour if anyone is taking the Carroll Street Greenway tour. Next one, Gwen?
Mm-hmm. This is Footnotes. And Footnotes is, the quote you see here is from the UBC Geography Department publication on urban Vancouver, and I love the quotation because the shore really was the shore was, it says the shore is the time between the sea and the land, and the shore is the midline in the life of the city, and it's so true. And so with this, I actually did the same thing that Gordon Price did, took the timeline. As you walk along this pathway, there are words carved in granite. There's 100 pieces of granite carved, and it's embedded in the sidewalk. With it, I have poetry and verses and words that denote a time frame by use of the graphics, the typographic. You'll change in sections. The words denoting the Aboriginal time on the shoreline is things like eelgrass or ulakan or something, words that refers to their life. And then I move into the industrial area with the trains and the development, and then into a current song actually by Gordon Smith.
Yes, Gordon
Yes.
Smith, yeah.
Morning rain is, and so the words are temporary. And that's probably is.
And is there next?
Yeah, thank you.
Is there one more? Is there another slide?
There is,
One more?
yeah, I think there's one more.
Ah, yes.
Uh-huh. That just indicates the sound, the piece that you hear under.
So the piece you're actually hearing being played
Pardon?
is this piece, the piece that people are hearing played?
Yes.
Is this piece in the Arctic?
Yes. And this is actually the instrument, the sculpture I had that was installed. And that sound actually came from the center of the arc there. This view of the arc there is just like felt like I was at the top of the world. I really did. It was an incredible experience. And I think everyone should, if they have a chance, go up there because it's like nothing I've ever seen. And to experience it was fantastic. But the thing was, that was actually at, the sun you see was at midnight in the Arctic. It was June the 28th.
And I think the surprise for me in the exploration of the work that Gwen does is just how, when we look at walking, it's not just about the physical thing of walking or the advocacy to make people walk, but to have the kind of experience, this elemental experience that brings earth and cosmos together, that I think that Gwen has so beautifully done. And I firstly want to thank the speakers so much for their time and the honor of this, and also to let you know that this was done intentionally, and we are intending you to meet and talk with these people, and they're expecting to be engaged by you. And I just really want to thank you so much, and I'm so sorry we don't have the time for the questions right now. Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you.